Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Now that my two obligatory informative videos are done for the day, it's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And some of my subscribers have aware me that Kinobody, aka the Bruce Wayne of the fitness industry. Oh, Bruce, that was one thing that would break fast. You'll spit on your body. Has put up a video of him doing some 120s on the seated shoulder press. And people said, hey Jason, what do you think about that? What's your opinion about it? And what the hell, I'll go ahead and talk about it. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on scaling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And, you know, I'm going to use this to segue a little bit into why I'm just not a fan of the seated dumbbell press. Well, I don't care what your training goals are, it's just not that great of an exercise compared to other stuff that are out there. And I know some of you are going to say, like, you know what, I've got amazing shoulders, and that's what I use. Hey, more power to you, brother. I'm just saying you're leaving a lot on the table by picking that exercise. There's just better stuff out there. So, the interesting thing, though, is that when you see the way Kinobody did them, I'm going to give credit where credit is due. I clown him a little bit. But truth be told, he actually has a pretty strong upper body, and he does admit that strength is the key to muscle mass, and that if you want a jacked upper body, which is what he promotes, you probably need to get really, really strong at several different types of presses, weighted pull-ups, chin-ups, things like that. He's dead right. And I will say, whatever my other criticisms aside of him, he does practice what he preaches there, right? He does practice what he preaches. Now, we could say a whole lot of other critical things, but that's not one of them. Now, to be honest, and I'm going to call it an incline dumbbell bench because that's what it was. This was not a shoulder press, and that's going to be my criticism here. The biggest problem with seated presses in general is that everyone turns them into an incline bench, and that is what he did. But fair is fair. The guy managed to get, as a guy who weighs under 200 pounds, mind you, guy who's weighing under 200 pounds, he managed to get a pair of 120s up to his shoulders and incline bench them from a dead stop for his first rep. Now, the rest of the reps are garbage. I don't give a shit. Complete waste of time partials. That first rep, the fact that he was able to get them there, hold them there from a dead stop, and complete a full rep with a pair of 120s on a steep incline, that's actually pretty good. I'm going to give credit for that. That's actually pretty strong. That's not bad at all, especially with what he weighs. I can't hate on that part. I can't hate on that. In fact, I'm going to say this is a guy with pretty strong chest and pretty strong delts. Reasonably strong, especially considering, what is he weighing, like 185, 190? About, what is he, in that range? It's actually pretty good. It's pretty good, all things considered. But my problem with it comes in the fact that this is not a shoulder press. I'm going to go so far as to say the fact that he already does a lot of incline benching, that this is pretty much a redundant exercise for him. And I'm not going to say dumbbells don't have their benefits for the incline, because they can, and it has to do with the stretch reflex or the myotatic reflex you can get at the bottom of a dumbbell incline bench. You know, that has some hypertrophic benefits. It does have its place. Might not be something I prescribe for most people, but it absolutely has its place, even for people who are doing incline. The problem is that he didn't do any of that. He just did partial reps. The only full range of motion he did was the first one. And I'm going to go so far as to say he didn't get a deeper stretch than he does with the barbell. So there was no real benefit to doing this over just doing an incline bench with a barbell. There was no benefit. Because, again, he just turned it into a heavy partial. The whole point of dumbbells on the incline is that you can come deeper. You can get a stretch reflex at the bottom because your hands can get lower. They can get lower than the barbell. And he's doing this, right? Doing this. He's doing half reps. And that's what everyone does on these shoulder presses. Well, here's the issue we run into. People say, well, what do you mean that's a shoulder press, not an incline? No, that's not a shoulder press. That is not an overhead press. Just because the dumbbells get higher than your head doesn't make it an overhead, because if that was the case, then the bench press would be an overhead press, because the bar ends up higher than your head. All right, to be an overhead press, you actually need to get the bar behind your head, the dumbbells behind your head. It needs to come up to at least to the ear level or further back at some point. Right? It needs to get above your head. And that means perpendicular with the spine. And if you don't, then essentially it is just an incline bench. And the reason that matters, why are we overhead pressing? Are we overhead pressing just for our upper chest and for our delts? No. we're overhead pressing to build the entire shoulder girdle. When you do them on those little seated things, not only do they have a mild incline to begin with, everyone leans further back and slides under. It turns it into an incline bench, and you end up with the weights right about here half the time. All right, that's not an overhead press. You need to be back here. I mean, I do the press all the time on camera. I'm a big fan of the press. And actually, Kinobody does the press also. I think the standing barbell press is hands down one of the greatest and most beneficial exercises in existence. All right, the fact that he already does the press, which he does the press already. I think I've seen him do 190 for some reps. So he actually does the press, and he's decently strong on it. He incline benches. This exercise was redundant. It's not bringing anything to the table. He's not already getting a superior recruitment from the other two, because he's getting full range of motion on the incline. He's not quite doing full range of motion on the overhead press, and I would say that could be shortchanging his upper chest development a little bit, but he is getting the rest of the shoulder girdle worked. So why is it important that we do the exercise correctly, and why do you benefit from the standing? Because with the standing, you have the ability to lay back to get the benefits of a steep incline so that you get the upper chest more. But as you drive it forward and you push your body forward and you get the bar further back, it actually does a decent job of recruiting the side, the posterior head of the deltoid. It actually does a pretty decent job with developing your traps. In fact, we've got some data out there, some EMG stuff showing that the overhead press done standing with a barbell, which Kinobody already does, is actually a really strong trapezius builder. And we know that when you do it standing with a barbell, it hits the rear delt and the triceps a lot harder than any of the seated work does. A lot harder, whether it's dumbbells or barbell. So what he's doing, he's really shortchanging a lot of those important muscles. And this is a guy who always talks about the importance of upper back and shoulder development for the look that he's talking about. And I'm going to agree with that. And I'm not an aesthetics guy. It's not my cup of tea. I do care about strength and sports performance a hell of a lot more. But I mean, if we're going to talk about really targeting those areas that Kinobody says you need to target, this variation of the press is not the best choice. It's not a good choice. And quite frankly, it just leads to potential injuries, because what you are ending up doing is that you're using a weight you can't really handle in an environment you can't stabilize, because it's really hard to come all the way down. Like if he replicated on the first rep what he does every time, yeah, he wouldn't get as many reps. But it would give you more overall stimulation with what you're trying to get. But those coming down the part of the way down is quite frankly, in my opinion, a recipe for disaster. It tends to lead to some instabilities. It tends to lead to impingement of the shoulder joint, particularly when the barbell or the dumbbells in this case get too far out and one drifts and you fail or have a problem. It's just carrying extra risk with no real benefit. And because you're doing it seated, and you can get to a point to where you can't get the torso movement that you need moving forward, because people tend to push back and turn it into a deeper incline, because not only do they lean back, but when it gets hard, they drive their back into the bench, right? Thus pushing the weight further forward, thus making it easier, but it's because you're using the chest instead of the shoulders to lift the weight. And that's not ideal. That's not what you're shooting for. And so what I would say with what he's doing, this exercise isn't really fitting the goals that he has. What I would say what he's trying to do with this exercise would be accomplished just by doing more of the incline bench and more of the standing press, which are exercises he already does. He already has a good strength base on. I feel like this exercise is just goofing off at this point for him. It's showing off and doing partial reps for everything but the first rep. It's not really getting the shoulders and everything else that he wants. You know, so what he does, he comes in and he does this, but then he needs to do a bunch of laterals behind it. And I guess the point that I would make is, why don't you just do more standing presses and more pull-ups if you want to get the rest of the shoulder structure, all the other heads of the delt, instead of this silly jerk-off variation that you're doing. And I'm not saying it's the worst exercise in the world, but it just seems like when you have someone like him who's obsessed with developing certain muscles, removing some of those muscles back from a compound movement and then being forced to throw more isolation in to attempt to make up for it just really isn't a good use of your time. And I'm just not a fan of this variation of the exercise, particularly for somebody who's already doing barbell incline and the standing press. those two exercises are going to do everything that you're trying to do with these dumbbells when you're doing these half reps seated. It does everything you're trying to do with those even better. And because other muscles that are important get involved. And I think any of the guys who are chasing that whole aesthetic, certain that capped delt, big upper chest, big tricep look that guys want, and that's what he's marketing, this variation is not the best one to get that. Those other two exercises will give you that if you build one hell of a base on them. And I would suggest that those two exercises are what has given his upper body that look that he talks about. And this one is just a jerk off movement. This is just a silly fuck around-itis as far as I'm concerned for what his goals are at this point. And look, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with throwing in some extra exercise variation, but it just seems silly to me that he's doing a variation of a shoulder press that is essentially taking work off of the side delt, the rear delt, and the traps, and then coming behind and trying to isolate those muscles afterwards. It's like, why not just train them with your big movements? Just do more overhead pressing with a barbell standing, which the press, it will hit those muscles way better than this will. And if you're just worried that you're not getting enough upper chest from it, do more of the incline benching. He's already got a good base on the incline bench, just do more of it, problem solved. I just feel like this variation that he's throwing in isn't adding anything, and it's just a high-risk exercise, just risking further injury without any benefit from it. I'm just not a fan. I mean, and you know, do what you will. If someone wants to do this exercise, knock yourself out. Just saying there are other things that bring more to the table for the same goals. And he's already doing those others. He should just do more of them. Just my opinion. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.